telling us yesterday about publications, about doing a thesis, either by paper form or by the traditional, conventional manuscript. There are people with experience, but they might not have the interest or the best way to share it, so that what they know, I can know by working with and around that person. And then definition number 2, who is a mentor? A mentor is that person who can inculcate, who can share, who can convince, who acts as a good bait for anybody to swallow even very bitter pills. Like yesterday, we were told how you can present a paper and all of a sudden it takes a year to get responses. You'll certainly give up. But if the one behind that paper review is a good mentor, then maybe the time to receive the comments will be shortened. Then the comments won't be like nonsense, you don't know what you are doing. It will be referring you to the very centers where to get the correct information so that you improve. And who is a mentee? A mentee is a recipient, either at an older age or younger age, who holds similar identical qualities, however, at infancy level. I'll share an experience with you. My high school biology teacher got a shock of his life when he came to Mbarara University and found me, and I was meant to supervise his master's. Therefore, as we climb ladders, as we come down the ladders, we must have all the humility to share, to be patient, to be lovely, and that's when we'll succeed. But while I was reading around this topic of mentorship, I dug deep into the history of the oldest universities and why the developing countries, Caribbean and Pacific countries, African, Caribbean, and Pacific, we continually emphasize researching on a problem. And at our level as supervisors, at our level, having done our graduate studies at master's and PhD, and those of us thinking to assemble all the knowledge they have to do a PhD, we know what a problem is. But if I may throw a quick question, why do we research on a problem? And those people that introduced us into formal and conventional research, why did they convince us to research on a problem? Yet for them, most of us who have been to the Western world, they no longer do problem solving. They no longer do confirmatory research. They are in exploratory research. Therefore, we need as supervisors, as graduate mentors, to come up with a new notion, with a paradigm shift, to convince those we have identified, those talents that we have identified, to begin also on baby steps of researching on interest. And what is an interest? An interest, if I may simplify to the simplest level, we've just been on holiday in Kenyan schools, both primary and high school. And we have returned to school, and in Uganda, we've just been, and Tanzania, we are on holiday. But I want to assure this meeting today that companies that have excelled in profit don't have problems. They instead have problems of spending. And that's why there are adverts like Coca-Cola. There are adverts like East African breweries. There are adverts like the new oils. You know, we are now in an era of oils, beneficial oils. They market when they know the critical mass of those who consume will put those who buy on their tenterhooks. Like when children are coming for holiday, there's always a new soda product and you must buy it as a parent. So I have used that example to inform this meeting that we mentors are parents. We must be patient. We must not react. We must actually look at things in a different way from those who are receiving from us. And that's why we hold a critical thinking level that should be above and should remain above those we are mentoring. All the above can be defined differently by different scholars. And I know in this meeting and in this sharing, we are different scholars. But it comes a time, like how ICAD came up with this topic, we must take a responsibility to thank the Deputy Executive Director who thought of the short courses rather than the previous courses like this one, so that we begin sharing and have a paradigm shift to yet another level. You will notice on the screen that I have shared with you a format of University of Lusaka where I'm supervising, and this student, I finished supervising him, Dr. Boniface Mafela. They have a format. Anytime you do something, you finalize something with the student, you must communicate to the graduate school. And because it is on a distance supervision, the student doesn't sign. But you must send an email, copy to the graduate school for the student also to share his or her signed copy in agreement of the assignment that you did together. And in that way, we teach our students, we teach the graduate school, and we keep records that we either in the differences that we had yesterday from Professor Josephine and Professor Tsekwa and Dr. Kinyuru at his start where he enlightened us of some supervisors hunting for students so that we have something on record. Should anything go wrong, then you have a benchmark. Then you have somewhere to lean against. From there, we go to a slide that explains the effective mentorship guidelines. Effective mentorship guidelines are many, and they range from subject to subject, discipline to discipline, title of research to title.
Hello.
I'll give an example.
Yes, Professor.
Come in, please. Go ahead,
Yes.
Vincent.
Yes, can we go to the previous slide?
The previous slide.
Yes, sure.
Let's go back. We are there.
Yes. Now, it was very interesting to me that you're suggesting there should be a shift from focus on problem to interest.
Yes.
I wonder where we could be putting solutions, probably focus from problem to solution. Is that also part of the game, or it is subsumed in one of the two, either problem or interest? Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. You know, when we are in such sharings, when we are in such meetings, it is hard to, because you have already gone to slide number 9 or slide number 10, but I do accept. Let me give you an answer to that. You will agree with me that if we made a paradigm shift from problem that gives us solutions for immediate resuscitation of any challenges we have in life, we have in changing life demands, then we might take more time, sort of, or some people might see that this is the most lucrative as it is in the developed world, because we shall ourselves not have consultants on biological weapons. We shall have cut off people who are coming to do us nuclear power. We shall have cut off on using technology that is not for us in automobiles. Yes, you are right. Because there are 3 levels of research. We either research exploratory on a new thing, although there is another notion that there isn't anything new to research on, but I want to convince and assure this gathering that there are very many new things that we haven't researched on. Therefore, because we consider ourselves not solid in terms of resources, particularly funding, money, and time, we need to start baby steps. We need to sit down as we have sat down and say, which cohort can continue with problem research and which cohort can start with interest research. That's why some of our universities, if we can stop putting this on TV and I talk softly and quietly, some universities have seen and are migrating from undergraduate to research university. An example is University of Nairobi. An example is Strathmore. An example is Makerere. And this is the way to go. But as we go down in our slides, I'll be opening up on why I'm thinking that way and why we need to go that way. Because if I may also derive something from the slides ahead for purposes of convincing Vincent and everybody, you will notice that everybody who takes up leadership in the developed world must first invite African heads of state. And it is from the same notion that ICAD came into existence after Japan invited all African leaders to discuss research, to discuss problem solving, but they never discussed interest development. Let's go to the slide of effective mentorship. But thank you for that interjection, Vincent.
Thank you too.
If effective mentorship is wide and far, because as I told you, all of us in this discussion have our interests and we have our levels of effectiveness and our levels of weakness. I didn't want to dwell in what I discussed last Friday on SWOT analysis of the student and the mentor. But we can borrow from that and we say that in effective mentorship, we must establish clear expectations of both parties. Until we get to that level, then we might be on a journey when we don't understand each other. And the moment we understand each other from the word go, I can assure you, even the distance will be shorter, even the results, as you have said, Vincent, will be gotten much earlier than expected. Then we must build rapport. And the ecosystem we work in as the mentee, the people around the one you are mentoring, the institutions they are in, like some of us who supervise students in diaspora, and we only go either for proposal defense, we go for mid-term review of the data collection, and finally, we must submit our comments on a thesis. The mentee networks, even beginning at the family level, because should the student fail, then even the family will ask, by the way, who failed you? I can assure you, some of us at the mental level, we have challenges and we must defend our names and our worth. we must be good at listening. In management, this is a subject that is critical, and many universities in social sciences have had to invite in the engineers, the doctors. I could share something personal I've had this morning. A friend called me and asked me why these days in Uganda, if a teacher dies or a motorbike rider service provider dies, their barriers, organization, and the way the send off takes is bigger than if a minister died. And I answered this friend of mine that that's humility, that's mentorship, that's the gist of the service the person has given. He might be on the lower level of earning, on the lower level of society fame, but the service he gives is critical. And indeed, we mentors are privileged and are God-given and God-chosen, so we must do good work and expect the results, expect the gifts much later. Probably those of you who are believers like me, maybe our gifts are in heaven. We must provide guidance and support in reading and writing skills, in idea development, idea mooting, in mathematics, a subject that is highly feared. And why I said we must migrate from problem solving to interest solving, I want to assure this meeting that the skills in mathematics have died. Why have they died? Because of late. Children sit back in cars and the parents push trolleys, or the workers of a supermarket. Whereas a long time ago, those of us who are in my age bracket, you'd be given 10 shillings to go and buy paraffin and buy matchbox and buy salt. You'd be given an opportunity to ride the old wheel of a bicycle, and you make sure you don't mix paraffin with salt, otherwise you'll be beaten. So in this way, you'd even bring change and learn accountability. You'll actually make sure you keep time, because the salt was meant for the next meal. But now you know we have everything in store. Even we store sugar for the next 6 months. Not that sugar will not be there. So in terms of academia, how can we give mentorship on piecemeal? That's the topic I'm coming to. Because if we give everything wholesale, then we don't mentor that person to become who we are. So we should do it piecemeal. We must share our experiences without reservation, that the young brain will take up the consultancy, that the young brain will bring a contention, because probably what I researched on has been taken by events. I also have a personal sharing on this issue of sharing our experiences. I used to be very hard on my children, and I would buy the Uganda National Examination Board past papers. And one time my small son said, "Dad, I've been reading these papers you bought, but may I know when you sat your P7? Sheepish as I didn't realize, I hit the ear to him. And he said, "Dad, okay, maybe tomorrow we shall talk." The next morning, he knocked at the door of the bedroom and said, "Dad, which answer did you give? By the way, you people are being given objectives. And for us, even Teacher Jane doesn't give objectives. Which answer did you give for this number?" I forget the number, but the subject was on which of the following is a planet? And the only answer in the objectives A up to E was Venus. And I didn't know he had seen on TV that some of the astrophysicists have come up with explanation that the historical Galileo time proclaimed planets are no longer planets. And I can assure you, this is where it brings back to the issue of not being reserved as we mentor people, because things change and we live in a changing world. And with technology now, I can assure you, the phone you held 20 years ago, if you brought it, some of the children will not understand it. But some of these museum and classical storage of the previous technologies probably can ignite new thinking, new thoughts, and new ideas to bring better products. We must own to challenge and encourage through enumeration, through discussion, interrogation, and documentation all the time in order to evolve a new way of communicating. I have put this bullet and I'm explaining it using a few examples we see. You are at table having dinner, but everybody is not concentrating. Everybody is on the social media. Everybody is very busy. We must stop it. So when I come to you as my mentor, you continue on your modern phone or you have time for me. We must respect boundaries, which are imaginary in nature. The boundaries in mentorship are imaginary. And that's why some people call them conflict points. And these conflict points must be converted into intercept points. If we had an x-axis as the mentee or the graduate student and the y-axis as the supervisor or the mentor, we must enforce lines of intercept. If we drew line graphs of very many imaginary interests and perceptions and expertise, and we research on why we get lines of intercept between us and the ones we are mentoring. And final on effective among the few I identified, we must evaluate progress regularly to identify gaps. And that's why those who research on interest, they feel gaps. Until when shall we research on problems? Method of filling gaps. And also look at sour areas and how to effectively reduce what made those points be sour areas. This is a time to be honest in all forms, to get back together. And mentorship, for your information, is a skill and a gift. Not everybody can be a mentor. And on this point, I'll share with this meeting that there is no longer a clear-cut mentorship and talent identification in universities, in high schools and primary schools. Long time ago, when we entered universities, we would have tutorial assistants, we would have senior mentors, and you would actually go to consult. But because of everything now is economic and there's no time, there is no chance for us as mentors to identify new talent, which talent should replace us. And this is another point. Our graduate institutions, our graduate schools, our grant offices should have some bit of funding to give to those mentors or supervisors who can identify talent. And it is really overdue. And this should start right from the nursery school, even right from the family. Because in Europe, in the Western world, if you identify your son Dominic as good at football, you'll actually not bother him with physics, mathematics. You'll actually bring the toys that mentor him faster. And this is why we see some people have excelled. We need also those to identify talent on sports, to identify talent on technology, to identify talent. But I want to tell this meeting that about 15 years ago, a young man in Kampala, in old Kampala, who came up with a motor vehicle, was in prison. But the government picked that interest and they took him somewhere where he has done wonders in terms of technology development and new products development. Let's look at imaginary or incognito, but real directions to mentorship. There are imaginary lines, as I've talked, but let's look at them in detail. And this slide takes us to define your goals. Next slide, please, Javan. Javan, next, yeah, if we are there. Let us define our goals as academia. But then, are we on an economic stand? Are we on a psychological stand? Are we there to do self-actualization because you must supervise a PhD to be promoted to a professor? What are we? We are good at scholarly writing. Yeah, you can boast of having a paper in the Springer series, but have you checked whether your publication has been quoted? How many people have opened it? And on this point, can we all, mentors and in this course, register on academia? Because academia is, and other publishing houses and research harmonization institutions help us to gauge how far our researches have been opened. We are in management. What are the goals? Did you by accident get to that position? The art of speech or rhetoric is not common to all of us lecturers and professors. The negotiation skills, either negotiating to be in the middle line with your students, and that's why some universities have had to do and interest all those that must teach or lecture to do some refresher courses or a formal postgraduate diploma in education, so that they don't only make noise to students, they do real teaching, the pedagogy, which we saw and we must continue to emphasize. There's an imaginary line to identify potential, which I've just finished, and it's long-time role models that will identify those to replace them. And I've seen this in Kenya, particularly in the opera, the arts, people come out to compete. We used to think when we were at university that music, dance, and drama was done by those we thought had a certain level. But I want to assure you, we attended university with some of the classical musicians, and we can't measure up to the standard of living they are at. So success and potential go together, and it rhymes with interest. And we must work with practical people. The reason why everybody now, be it in social science, be it in liberal laws, be it in anything, we are looking at invention. We are looking at innovation. We are even wanting to change our disciplines and go into practical subjects because the world has become practical. We must reach out to the would-be mentees as future candidates at an early age. We must get to the retirees, those who have retired, and learn from them and get knowledge. We must get to industry and interest them with our ideas because it is industry that has a chain block that will release our perceptions, our products much faster than us. And that's why universities have partnered up with industry. We must partner up with organizations as researchers. And when we have finished our bit of researching, we sign protocols and agreements for industry and organization to take it to the next level. Then we must establish expectations and perceptions for the uptake. We must prepare for meetings to argue, to share, like this meeting we are in. Nothing different do we have from all of you, but we are rejuvenating, we are igniting, we are revising, and we must agree to disagree first as mentors, so that when we go to industry, when we go to our new students we are to supervise, we do it very well. We must take action on disagreement, particularly on saturated points, like my dear participants and fellow presenters, we have saturated the research notion called problem. We must now come up with the interest to research on interest. I'll give you an example. We carry lots of substrates and materials for research, but when we leave them in the sophisticated laboratories where we go to do higher level analysis, when we leave, they do excellent level of analysis, and that's why and where we lose. We must reflect on progress from the word go as a means of monitoring and evaluation to benefit new ideas. You might come up with a new idea in research, a new idea in management, a new idea on an accounting package, a new idea on several interlinked systems, and you keep it to yourself. The moment you keep it, the institution will lose, you as an individual will lose, but if you shared it, maybe another person could get more products. And if you have signed or if he's faithful, you will share the proceeds. Let's look at our next slide in relation to mentorship as a form of indoctrination by the mentors, the superiors, and government. I put this photograph to intrigue everyone listening to me this morning. This is a photograph of His Excellency, the President of France, when he invited leaders and upcoming leaders, particularly those from Africa. As I had told you that many leaders, as soon as they are sent to power, they must invite Africa. They must invite developing countries, Pacific and elsewhere, and Caribbean. But I want to assure you, this revolves on the sanctions America gave Cuba. Cuba, even up to today, there are some countries that don't go to Cuba. But I want to assure everyone in this meeting that if there is a country that has excelled in medicine, indigenous, conventional, orthodox, and whatever, is Cuba, because they were close. But Africa has not been closed. There have been several perforations, and we need to sit down as academicians. I hope there is no American listening to me, but whether they listen or not, when I was at Kansas, identifying my stingless bees and doing products within the stingless bee honey compared to Apis mellifera honey, many people got interested in my work, and we still coordinate with one another, like Professor Robert Brooks, But gentlemen and ladies listening to me, we need a secret closed door, if need be in a crucible where we should suffocate and come up with a new brass of academia that can shift from researching on problems to interest. People get interested in our problems and they research on them and sell products expensively to us. If you go to YouTube that I've shared below this photograph and you listen to that young lady, you'll probably change your department thinking, your faculty and college, and the next year you'll invite me to listen to the new exploratory research you have started in your university and as an individual and as mentors. The next slide takes us to what I answered to Vincent when he interjected. The oldest universities in Africa and their influence on mentorship trends today, or as of now. This takes us through the 12 oldest universities of Africa, as compared to the old world universities in Western Europe, the Cambridge, the Harvard, York, and many others. But on this slide, Javan, please share the slide, share the link of the French government inviting African young leaders and researchers. If we get back to the basics or from the first principles on where alphabet and reading and writing started and technology started, I don't know, my geography has died, but I don't know which continent Egypt is. But if I can be reminded and I visit my memory, Egypt stands on the continent that is right now going under dismemberment, because we have been told of the theory, Africa splitting into two continents. Maybe that's why we have floods in Uganda and many buildings going down all over East Africa and Southern Africa. But everything started on this continent. If I may ask, why the literacy rates and the technology rates are poorest on this continent? We all know the answer. Maybe selfishness, maybe ego, maybe lack of comparison, maybe high interest after the colonization had come. Probably we thought what they brought to us was more superior. And I've gone down through this slide without maybe repeating myself, but we could read at a time, every university of today in these 12 universities has a niche that has remained. And that niche, we attribute it to the mentors, to the good mentors. We attribute it to the identification of talent. And that talent has remained and been carried over. Let's take a quick example of the University College London, East African constituent colleges of Nairobi, which was identified for engineering, of Dar es Salaam, which was identified for law and political science and governance, of Makerere, which was identified for medicine and basic sciences that supported medicine like physics, biochemistry, chemistry, where you find that today the well-built environment and urban setting is in Nairobi as compared to Kampala and Dar es Salaam. Medicine was good in Makerere, but I don't know where we went wrong and slept, because now we have a lot of medical tourism to Kenya. Otherwise, the shift should have been Kenya to Uganda and Dar es Salaam to Kampala. And the democracy in Tanzania is the history of excelling in law and governance as compared to Ghana and others. Therefore, of these, which ones are very influential on specific subjects is the question. And me and you, at a time when we shall not be anymore, what will our legacy be as having mentored many? If we go to the next slide, it takes us to even what Vincent had asked on the geopolitics in exploratory research, business, and cream capture. I want to assure you that when these leaders globally invite us, and not preempting why Japan Prime Minister invited African leaders and gave them an interest to begin African Institute for Capacity Development, championing all this that we are doing, then we must know that the geopolitics of the world is not necessarily on leadership and governance. The geopolitics has much more to do with the economics of the day, with the business of the day, with the research of the day, and with the understanding of the resources that some people don't have. And it is at this moment and this juncture that I want to assure everybody listening that biodiversity increases towards the equator. The highest index of resources is at the equator. And Africa, as a continent, has the highest area that lies astride the equator. And for that matter, the landmass being bigger than when you bring North America, South America, China, and Europe together, we stand, or we should stand, to leverage on this very good thing. If you look at this photograph, Bush was standing next to China and Brazil, Indonesia, and Mexico, and Saudi Arabia. But if Bush went back to power now at his old age, you'd find some of the African presidents being invited to stand either next to China or Saudi Arabia. And this is the way to go. We should negotiate further. And in mentorship, if they invited you 10 years down the road after you have retired, will you be invited to stand next to your mentees comfortably? This is what I was telling you. The geopolitics of the world should help us to understand the academic politics of mentorship within our ranks and our universities. Let's look at global mentorship through funding. Of course, research and whatever we do in our universities needs resources. But let us understand mentorship through this slide on global mentorship through funding. Next slide, Javan. And please, participants, feel free to interject. And I hope my speed is not as fast. I used to be very fast in lecturing, but now maybe the young age has reduced my speed. If we look at the global mentorship through funding, we need resources to do research. We need resources to publish. And by the way, when we get back to what other presenters have said, there are journals where even if you paid today, next week you'll have your paper published at $150. What is the value? So if we look at the financial resources, the human resources, the natural resources, these are the things the developed world want to understand. And we hold a lot. And as we advance in technology, we advance in architectural designs, we advance in third level, fourth level, laboratory research analysis, then we must have the money. But where is the money? I want to assure this meeting that we are sitting on gold, but begging. And the day we go to sleep, some people come and pick the gold we were sitting in on, the diamond. And that's why they invite us to do analysis. You are funded by France, you are funded by Sweden, you are funded by the US, you are funded by Germany or UK on a sandwich PhD or even postdoctor. They say, please come and within the plan of your reading, the analysis must be done over there. We need to sit down in our management ranks, particularly those of you who are deans and the heads of departments and sit in Senate. If there is a shared research, technology transfer should be number one. If there is a shared research, some of the ingredients that require to be analyzed at higher level, probably when they do it back here, the technicians who have not flown with you to that university will understand, will get to another level. By the way, in Uganda, we had a cartoonist called Kanya, may his soul rest in peace. And one time he had a cartoon at Makerere graduation day, and he was complaining as a technician why Senate and the Chancellor never awarded him a PhD. And he was even getting to the nerves of the Senate that after all, this person you have given a PhD never came to the lab. He only brought the substrates. I prepared the solutions. I prepared the chemicals. I cleaned everything. I even recorded the results, maybe analyzed it. So for sure, I did 75% of his work. I need a PhD. I think we understand what I'm talking about. And this is mentorship. And in mentorship, we must share across board, right from the cleaner of the lab, to the technician, to the messenger, to the graduate student, and to you, the supervisor. Most times, at times, most students, because we have handled them wrongly, you'll be surprised if they have written their thesis through manuscript, that the next paper, you are not there. Historical and colonial ties must be broken, the explanation I've given on analysis, and we must also interest them to start sending their young brains to come and do research in Africa. Probably we could learn a lot from them. Culture and language barrier, the Anglophone and Francophone separate us again after colonization and within research. I want to inform this meeting that the highest product from the Ituri forest and the forests of Cameroon and Guinea to Ghana is starch from Dioscorea and other forms of wild foods that produce starch. And the highest pharmaceutical starch production is in Africa. But I want to assure you why we have never developed the highest drug line in Africa, where the 75% component of the products we produce in pharmaceutical factories comes from Africa. Let's look at accreditation of processes, publications, and qualifications You get a degree from a university, it is questionable. You get a degree from Western world, it's not questionable. This must end. We must sit together and agree that we are experts over our own. The standards as accredited by Inter-University Council of East Africa, by the Association of African Universities, by Reform Now, which has come up as a formidable organization in the agricultural discipline research and agricultural economics. The different innovations they have put on board that are forming products within the beverage fraternity, we must do more. And we need more. And the way we can get more is through identifying more talent, mentoring it, and getting to the levels of the critical mass of the academia numbers we need. In China, one engineer has about 20,000 artisans. But in Uganda, one engineer has about 20 artisans. In Kenya, maybe to a ratio, as I was Googling, about 250. Because we started debates much later. This is the time. You can actually get astonished and surprised that about 70% of the artisans that are building the East African crude oil pipeline from Hoima, Western Uganda, to Tanga in Tanzania, will not be East Africans. Because we went theoretical, we went necktie, and we thought the other disciplines, the other ranks were not of high class. This is the time to shift. Academic practice exchange, I had explained that, we can actually jump it. But as we go for seminars and conferences and others, let us continue to be mindful of our base. If we go to the next slide, it explains how TICAD conference brought about ICAD. And what is interesting at this conference, when I Googled, next slide, Javan. What is interesting, this conference of the Tokyo International Conference on African Development that happened in Japan and continues to happen in Japan apart from 2016, when it happened in Kenya, was sponsored by United Nations, African Union Commission, and World Bank and UNDP. As if probably in Africa, there is no good conference facilities, and we must be mindful. I was interested to compare how Mexico was closer to Bush, but my president, His Excellency Museveni, if you look at the photograph on your right-hand side, is number 2. So let us be mindful of our research, let us explore more, let us expose our findings so that we are invited to these meetings with pomp, and we need products from our researchers. Next slide takes us to academia and all forms of mentorship through convening of regular meetings. This was a dissemination conference of Makerere University CEDA project, the Swedish International Development funding to all the people it funded. And I can assure you, I like this photograph. Otherwise, other donors would have taken this to Stockholm. But as we move further, we need more of this. And in mentoring, it is at this conference that you'll find a university from Western Uganda, a university from Kigali, Rwanda, a university from East Africa that had partnership in our multidiscipline, discipline research agenda, like how VCRES used to do. You find if you need to do statistical package analysis within the cohort of the funding theme, you have a statistician. Within the cohort of the technology theme, you have an architect, you have a materials engineer, rather than one brain on material engineering, suffering alone, yet it required. I can see people interjecting, and these are the silence debates. We need to speak out. I wonder why academia, we are very quiet, we don't want to share, and those who are non-academic pass resolutions on our behalf. We need to speak to them. Next slide takes us to ratios of mentorship and outputs on our continent, population numbers. If you look at this, as Africa grows in population, I don't know, maybe it's the technical team that had muted me, sorry. And we look at our tertiary institutions, we actually win out. The map of Africa freezes. Then when we go to scientific research and scientific outputs, we again freeze further. And when we come to patent registration, where I want to explain the reason why I put this slide, we are obscure. And yet, the Regional Intellectual Property Office that has its headquarters in Zimbabwe, Harare, ARIPO, African Regional Intellectual Property Office that feeds into WIPO, should have helped all the academia in Africa to register patents of their findings, of their innovations, and we are not doing much. So what's the way forward? The way forward is that this mystery must end, and the technology and the advancement in research in the social science models that we have come up must be patented. I had an opportunity to be at ARIPO as we were having our patent reviewed on Phytoraka dodecandra, me and the late Professor William Isharaza and Dr. Charles Muchungzi of Mbarara University of Science and Technology. And we found a war between a company that had used the patent structure of the shape of a bottle without paying royalties. I got amazed when the one who developed the structure of the bottle explained why he had put a hand shape within the structure of the bottle. But this bottle was meant to package alcohol, but some other beverages that are not alcoholic used the structure. Then this gentleman explained to us that when anybody is tipsy, he can give you his wallet, he can give you all the knowledge you need. And I got to understand why when people are tipsy, they talk about what they have done, they talk about their achievement, they speak Swahili in my country, they sing church hymns. But that tipsy person can never give you the remaining drop of alcohol in his bottle.
Prof, there's a hand from Juliet.
Yes?
There's a hand from Juliet.
Juliet. Juliet?
Yes, Prof.
Go ahead.
Yes, Prof. Thank you so much, Prof, for this discussion of this very important topic. As you discussed, I really kept, there are many issues that came to mind, which I thought maybe it's important we share.
Yes, go ahead.
I will begin with ment and mentee, and then come to the issue of patents and intellectual property rights. To begin with, I will share my experience from the university perspective, the mentorship programs. And it's good that in your sharing, you're talking about effective mentorship. I loved that. Many times, the mentorship issue ends up sour. Reason being that many universities do not have guidelines that can guide this relationship between a mentor and mentee. And so in the end, you find either mentee is confusing a mentor to be like a supervisor and the vice versa. And also you find sometimes the mentor doesn't also know the boundaries. And so in the end, the relationship sometimes can end up ending in a very bad way. I'll give an example, a point in time where the mentor and mentee relationship didn't work out. And in the end, the mentee found that he was being actually used by the mentor because he found some of the work she was doing was the mentor was planning to have it published. So I think many times if there is no boundaries, and I think you kept mentioning that, the relationship, which should have been very helpful, can end up being very sour. So I would think universities would come up with guidelines that can help this relationship to become effective and fruitful. Now, Prof, when you come to mention about the patents and the intellectual property rights, many of us as researchers and more so in academia, we have not appreciated and we do not know actually what it takes for us to be able to get patents for our own works and innovations. So I would think in future, we need to explore and be trained on this journey. It is patenting and intellectual property is still an abstract idea to many of us. And I would think exploring and even having training on this would help many of us academicians. And again, I want to thank ICAD and you, Prof, for this very timely training. You are really tackling core issues. Thank you. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you, Juliet. Even before I joined ICAD, they did the director training and the extension maybe can get us the dates as he makes closing remarks. ICAD trained on patenting and intellectual property rights. But if I can inform this meeting, there are baby steps in the making, championed by Professor Johnson Ekpere of Nigeria, who was the chair of the African Commission during the African Model Law, is hard on me as one of my mentors that ICAD and the Inter-University Council of East Africa runs a patenting and intellectual property conference or workshop now that East African region has very many products that are going on the market, and the commercial world, the multinational rich companies might jump and pick their ideas. I hear you loud and clear, and if you have been very active on civic platforms in the country, in February, I was hosted on one of the platforms with Professor Johnson Ekpere and Professor Aaron Hamilton to discuss patenting legislation and intellectual property rights. And it is my pleasure to receive your request, and the director training and extension who has ably managed all of us is listening. So let us work up and get spinning ideas to continue. To conclude on this slide, I want to assure you that what we see on scientific research, what we see on tertiary institutions mantle, what we see on patent registration and intellectual property rights, about 10 to 20, if not 25% of what is in the North or West has been a contribution of the African researchers. I'll conclude by giving an example on maybe some of you who are in the chemistry department and engineering. A research in Kenya researched on the changing color of Lake Baringo or the Rift Valley lakes within Kenya, Rift Valley area. At some point, you'll find that Lake Baringo is green, at another point is blue, at another. So the changing colors were as a result of the microbes within the waters at different times. Like we have changing colors within the water at the Python Center in Queen Elizabeth National Park. In the morning, it is green. In the afternoon, it is blue. In the evening, it is yellow. One might think that it is as a result of the early morning sunrise rays and the afternoon overhead and the evening sunset rays. That is wrong. The issue is about the algae and different microbes within the water bodies. So to crown it all, this researcher left the data in the US and they used it to another level to come up with an innovation on bleaching properties at different times, using different properties that they found in the microbes. And this formed the basis of some of the detergents that we use and are on the market. So I hear you loud and clear, Juliet, on behalf of all the participants and ourselves as ICAD, and we will be charged very fast to run the next training on intellectual property rights and patenting. The next slide takes us to global research productivity. If you look closely on this global map.
Prof, before you move to the next slide.
Yes.
There's a comment from one Evans Nyakeri.
Yes.
He's asking you to comment on in Kenya and maybe elsewhere, the silent debate that we do not need all PhD in management of the universities in the various senior cadres, VC, DVC, and even registrar. They can serve best in areas of their specialization and student mentorship rather than being clerks of university management boards. Comment, please.
Thank you, Joseph. And that's why management, I would wish also to appreciate Mr. Patrick Wau for the diversity of making sure you are positioned and stationed there as a team. I wish to assure this meeting that Africa lost it when we looked at rising in management as supported by rising in academia and research. The best companies in the world do not have highly qualified or highly read people. They are just middle level trained people, but with the mantle and skill and interest in management. And at most, they are accountants and economists. Therefore, we must look at universities in a business perspective. The business that the university does is equivalent or identical to the business Coca-Cola does in their production industry. The core business of a university is to manufacture academicians, is to manufacture products to sell to the other end users. But when you put an academician, particularly those of us who are in the science fraternity, you tend to cripple the spinning out and vibrant systems unless if that individual has the ingredients that relate to management and economists. That's why a long time in America, I think in 1856, I will Google it again, they had to do a common course called development studies. Whether you are a doctor, whether you are an engineer, whether you are a lawyer, whether you are an economist, an agriculturist, a social scientist, a historian, a linguistics in the Institute of Languages, a statistician, you need to understand the underlying principles of development studies. Because after all, you are reading hard to earn a better living, but if you don't know how to manage what you earn, you end up and die poor. I finally comment that while we were at university in Makerere, a researcher could not attend his wedding until 7 p.m. because he was busy meeting Drosophila melanogaster up on the top level of this botany department. Only his friend turned him down and said, please, I will not say his name. Your wedding is almost canceled. So we need to be mindful about the management skills, the management potential we see in someone, and make effort that the core values of universities are taken care of rather than the conventional promotion of leaders who are not helping our universities, particularly when universities decided to do elections. It beats my understanding as an academician at my level to find people are competing, and it should be natural. You should see that so-and-so would be the next vice chancellor, so-and-so would be the next head of department. So-and-so has mentored very many people. And in most universities in the Western world, you will see the humility and I can't tell you the character of those leaders in positions is far more than what I see in Africa and East Africa. But I want to also tell you that global research productivity, most of the senior researchers that have gone to the North and West are identified either at conference, are identified at some of what we write, are identified at very many levels, although we compete and write concepts for Commonwealth funding, for other fundings, but the screening and the processing of the next level academia should be led by us, the mentors. We identify someone we recommend. And even if there is no money, we need to advise our national planning authorities. Good enough, all the East African countries have national planning authority that interject into the East African Community Commission on Planning, so that we get another funding vote on identifying talent. Let's go to the next slide in the interest of time, but feel free to interject as listeners. The mentorship requires resources because we need energy, we need time, we need empathy, we need humility, we need honesty, we need inclusion. I'll explain this slide using my personal example. Some of us who don't sit in bars, we lose deals. I'm told the most productive and expensive deals are reached at in those good social places. We need to be in groupings. We need to be in what do we call them? I wish to thank one of my senior staff here who introduced me to his club. We need to be in clubs because we learn a lot. We get ideas. Back to this slide. Africa. This is a world map. On the left-hand side of the slide, we have a world map at night. When you bring it together, you go and get satellite images of the different continents at different times of the night, and you amalgamate it. This is what you get. But look, Africa is dark at night. And I want to assure you, the light you see in Canada, much of it is solar. And this is why, when they researched on a new interest called energy, they are now transforming the other forms of energy and demonizing them, that we go green energy. Why? They have the technology. How? They sell us the technology. When? They are stopping producing what we've been buying from them. And for that matter, that's where I appeal to everyone that we get interested in the idea of researching on interests. But then look at the right side, and you look at this young man who, in essence, must do his homework before sunset, because tomorrow the teacher Dominic, will have to beat him because he didn't do homework. Let's get back to our personal levels now. It is us who do homework for our children instead of guiding them. I brought in this photograph to explain the difference between guiding and doing. Mentoring is not doing the work for the mentee. Mentoring is guiding. And as you guide, you gauge the interest, you gauge the potential, you gauge the level at which that student you are mentoring at master's and PhD can be better than you, can be worse than you, can be average. And you get a point of intercept, where to come in, how to come in, and when to come in. I'll give an example. I was supervising a PhD doing inventory research in Bwindi. The student was very energetic, would go to the field at any time, and was bringing data. But using the Palm Pilot gadget, which would help us to locate the gorillas and other points where gorillas would go to eat some of the plant products, particularly bamboo and Prunus africana and Merianthus anus. We got to understand that every time I went with him, he would identify more plants that the animals use. But this was a wrong perception, because I had traversed wind forest many times than he had, and I participated in habituating gorillas. So I at least would probably divert from the main transect or from another hill into where my memory had met and seen gorillas. Until I explained that if I was a harsh supervisor, I should have given him negatives. Let's look at the conventional memory of elephants. Those of us who are in natural and biological sciences, although when we broke into groups, the biological group was not as active as some of us wanted. An elephant will not go back to where the grandparents were hunted. In other words, it has a biological clock on all factors that influence and affect their living. Where to get food, where danger is and where to survive and where to give birth from. And this is an analogy I bring in the world environment, to the human environment, to the university, where we teach, supervise, and mentor those to replace us. As Juliet has interjected, should you have a conflict, then the publications will not have your name. Should you want to steal data and put the publication as you coming #1 so that you are promoted, I want to assure you, you'll be doing a service. You'd rather be #7, but you are a supervisor and you remain at par with the person who collected the data. Next slide brings us to the climax of what everybody should know, that beautiful ones are not yet born. The young are clever than the old. That's why we see the latest technologies and models are coming at this time. And I wish to inform this meeting that there's a new model, biological biomathematics, that has predicted that as we continue to do more research on viral pathogens that cause a disease, particularly related to SARS and the recent COVID-19, then we continue to increase the incidence of the ineffectiveness of vaccines, which anybody in this meeting that has interest should Google. But the argument does not only stop there, it goes on diet. That the level and the diet people are feeding on now is making the immunity within individuals reduce further. Therefore, if we are not careful, we might mentor people that will not replace us effectively. That's why we must get back to the drawing board and look at some of the things that should not change in the world, particularly our world in East Africa. Things to do with tradition, things to do with diet, things to do with the modes of life, so that all the academia, the faculties, young and old, that have excelled in traditional and indigenous knowledge, food science, engineering, must emulate and come up with relics that kept the African race intact. I'll give an example. Just 2 weeks ago, Biden went back to his roots in Ireland. And the first thing he did was to go and eat the big vegetable and Irish potato food center. When you have a friend in London, they'll certainly take you close to Canterbury or Surrey on the last weekend of the month to eat the big fish and the roasted potato. If you want to kill a Munyankore, those of you are listening to me, I come from a tribe in Uganda called the Nyankore. You deny that person millet. And scientifically, some of you who are in food science, millet has iron, millet has all forms of nutrients. Therefore, in order to build a critical mass of what we need, we must interest people to go in production of the traditional and indigenous foods we had in our region. And we shall get the talents, the mentees we need that have the energy, the physiology that will take us to the next levels of going to another planet. I will not say the moon. And the sky will be the springboard, not, as we say it, as the limit. I recently told one of my children that the sky is a young lady. I told her, you have excelled, continue. The sky is the limit. He said, Dad, no. The sky is the springboard. You can imagine a professor being challenged by a little one. Therefore, we must be careful as we mentor others. Let's look at critical thinking and at honors, masters, and PhD levels. What is critical thinking? Are you analyzing negatively? Are you analyzing positively? Are you in the normal? I want to assure this meeting and everybody listening to me that critical thinking takes the stride, moving from negative skew to normal to positive skew and closing the circuit. Problem solving, problem philosophy, African problems as they are current. What's happening? Yes, we must understand them, and we cannot do away. If we
Excuse
can't
me,
do,
Prof.
yes.
Professor Twa has raised his hand.
Oh, Professor.
Hello, Professor.
Assalamu alaikum. Go ahead.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to take you back.
Yes.
It's not a question, but it's a small concern. As you were explaining, Dr. Juliet interjected, and then it was slide number 12, I think. Can you kindly go back? Because you, after explaining what Juliet was concerned about, you just went ahead and forgot. I know you didn't intend it, but kindly go there because we want to listen to that. Otherwise, we are enjoying your lectures, sir.
The slide on universities.
No, research productivity. I could see a map where there was a lot of research outputs from the North America, and then
Japan put the map on patents. Put the map on patents.
You didn't talk about that. You just left it hanging, and that one.
This one, oh, global research productivity. Okay, okay.
Sorry, Professor.
No, it's okay. It's understandable, Prof. It's like I pity you when you are invited by State House to go and address those Changwanzi people. You might tell them and forget to tell them to make you a minister because you are ministerial material. So I forgot to explain this. Global research productivity, I wanted to inform this meeting that if you go to the Atlas of Science or you go to Current Science Journal, you'll get the map or maps of the current research being done. And when you enter close into the topics, of course, they give you the points, but you can extrapolate backwards up to the point and the title that point researched on. I want to assure you, much of it is not inventory, much of it is not documentation, much of it. By the way, thank you, Prof, for taking me back, because this is very important on mentoring. We should, as departments and individuals, do away with issues to do with documenting, issues to do with inventory. After all, Speak and Grant came here and they did all inventories of what we didn't know. Let those come as accidents. Let Anthony Katende of Makerere University Herbarium was with us in Karinzu Kasio Hachitomi, and he got lost because we were making noise if you are in a forest or walking. So we had to go back and look for him at about 10 p.m. and we found him weak and we brought him out of the forest. But little did we know, he had come across a short ficus tree, which eventually became a new plant. And we are grateful. The specific name is Katendai in the nomenclature. Therefore, as mentors and heads of departments and graduate schools, let us emulate what is done in food science. Let us emulate what is done in engineering. Let us emulate what is done in agriculture. Students come together with their titles and they do present, but if you have something to do with inventory, something to do with documentation as an objective, they tell you to drop it. And the university where I did my PhD background courses, PhDs don't have more than 3 objectives. Masters, you can never have a recommendation for further research. PhD, no. So this is how I brought in this. And for that matter, when we make it go that way, we get impactful products, impactful publications, and we will get more points in our continent that is almost obscure. Let's get back to the slide I was on, critical thinking at honors, master's, and PhD level. Javan, yes, there. I'll go to explain idea generation. Mentors and some of the mentees that are in attendance, I want to assure you that the best university in the world, as I have told you, is the mother's womb. The best research that will generate new knowledge and become an interest, you saw it when you are young. But jumping onto things that are coming up, maybe if you are in accounting, if you are in management, you can do those things because of recent accounting and management are coming up with one software to analyze everything, moving from HR, moving to accountability, moving to projections of new funding and new budgeting. But when it comes to some of the other disciplines and professionals, we should actually have an idea generation seminar. But all our universities, we do concept and proposal writing seminar, we do dissemination seminar. As universities, let us come up with the starting point. Let us convince our heads of department to have an inceptional seminar called idea generation. Let us bring our dreams on board. Let us bring our experiences on board, and we get concrete ideas to sell to the new mentees that will replace us. At Mbarara University of Science and Technology, I know one of you can ask me, what did you do on this? We came up with an idea to support the master's and PhD, and we developed even a diploma, which I know government is phasing out on biotechnology. But since then, we placed our students in their practicum within the different communities, and they came up with very many products. Of recent, if you have your ears on the ground and you are not a Ugandan, there are very many beverages and alcohol and coming up and being packaged. God forbid, Bureau of Standards should work hard, but all these came from the different plants and crops and fruits, and even now we have the hypoxis that is coming up with as an immune booster. I can tell you, the sky is the springboard, as I was advised by my little one. Then we must have merger lines. We must have crossing and intercept points as a method, as a new method of analysis. We tend to package our data and our analysis in regression, line graphs, bar graphs. But of recent, those classical publications require you to amalgamate the line graphs, the bar graphs, the regression together. And then you look at salient points where most of these are meeting. And then you ask yourself, why and when? And if you extrapolate and put it in the 4D structure, you can amazingly see at what time. Let me tell you an example where I bring this idea from. In 1995, I was hosted by Pedu Lake bee farmers, and they took me to an interesting evening as a surprise to see yellow rain. My professor Muhammad Ratif told me, this evening, Dominic and Mr. Musoke, we are taking you to experience rain and to be baptized, since I know you are Christian. Musoke was working with Care International and was doing research on perceptions of communities. He was a social scientist. I was in honey and in honey ingredients. I want to tell you, have you ever watched yellow rain? If you get that experience, you can't know. When we went back to our hotel, he asked us to write a 2-page comprehension on what we had observed. And I'm deriving this to allude into Professor Josephine lecture of yesterday and Dr. Kinyuru's lecture of mentoring people on how to publish, and Professor Tsekwa's work on how to develop some of these ideas on publication and thesis writing. I wrote and I got 3 out of 10. Mr. Musoke wrote and he got 8 out of 10. Why did I get 3 out of 10? It's because I was Christian, so I saw everything in the perspective of Christianity. It's because I was a basic scientist background. I looked at everything as being factual, but in other words, I was wrong. I was lucky to get 3. The yellow rain was, bees were flying in the evening to roost in swarms, and they were dropping pollen they had ingested as their feces. The perception of the real rain, the pollen was intercepting with the sun's rays as sunset came up. And this was at a flat environment within the Pedu Lake Island. What do I mean to bring from this analogy to mentoring? We should test out our mentees on something not similar to what they are interested in, so that we gauge the multiplicity of their understanding. That's why in most universities, when you go to do Viva, expect a question. If you have ever done your PhD or master's elsewhere, let us develop this understanding. At Southern African universities and Europe, you'll get a question that is not in your discipline. If you are doing engineering, they'll ask you on historical perceptions. If you are doing law, they'll ask you on science. Because you might get a problem within your dispensation that is not in your discipline. How do you reason? And this is the reasoning that we must bring into the minds of our students we are supervising at the critical level that is far away from their discipline, that is far away from their topic, that is far away from their results. Let me tell you my experience as I sat my Viva at University of Cape Town. Of course, your supervisor is in the gallery, is failing or passing with you. The structure is 17 professors sit, and the chair tells you that whoever asks a question and you pass it, he will actually go to the gallery. If you don't make it to 3/4, you have failed. In other words, I'm calling to this meeting that let us change the fashion and the structure of Viva Voce, so that it makes our students know there is that moment where you forget about the analysis you did in the food science lab. there is that Viva Voce where you forget how you are looking at historical cases if you are doing a PhD in law, where you forget that there are new varieties that are coming up, but at the Viva Voce, they will not be asking how you have grafted, how you have come up with a new product within the agricultural sector. No, you must be an all-round thinker. You must be an all-round academician. You must be an all-round person to bring, as you see down here, I can tell you this individual did all the mathematics right from triangles to structures of a tree to circles, and that's the way to go. We must review of public domain knowledge as opposed to secretive things that we do within our interest, within our disciplines, and that's why and how and when we develop to the levels we are expected. Next slide, please. Java, next slide. The virtual acuity patterns as key parameters and talent identification in new mentees. I'll start by saying that we all know kites and hawks or the scavenger world, the scavenger animals. On a kilometer above, they'll see the food on your table that today it's not beans. And they'll come for the meat. They will not take the ugali, the kaunga. Of course, for us, we would serve in a mess and walk to our rooms to improve on the bad beans. But the day of serving meat or chicken, if you made a mistake of going out, there were hawkers within the compound that would help you summarize the meal faster. So let us not have our mentees summarize our profession, summarize our long-term hard-earned profiles. And for that matter, we should have appendage sites as entry points. New knowledge centers should be within the possession of the mentor. Most the times, the mentees come with new ideas, new knowledge, and we oppose them. That's the worst point. If you are mentoring me, I'll know you'll not be my best supervisor. In other words, let us read. Let us forget our yellow notes. Let us practice the new technologies of IT, and let us improve. And in that, even our mentees will identify us and market us to the different levels. I posed the question to the University of Zambia and University of Lusaka, not University of Cape Town, where Professor Hoffman called me to supervise with her. I asked Zambia and Lusaka, I said, how did you? They said, no, when you go in academia and you see someone who has been, whose works have been opened more than 900 times in a month, then you know this is someone to be friends with. I had not known that within the academia, there is another section where you can get alerts on how many are opening your work. So I quickly asked Julie, the academic administrator at Postgraduate University of Lusaka, to teach me how to loop myself into alerts. But if I was selfish, or I had ego, or I tried to be aloof, up to now, I wouldn't know. But on a daily basis now, as Dr. Kinyuru was teaching us in Mendeley, every day I get to know whether anybody has opened my what? Any of my material in the academia. Some universities are in better ratings because of you and you don't know. But when I was looped in, the webmetrics as statistics are being analyzed, you even get alerts. Like my paper in Springer, my paper in conservation biology, my paper with Professor Kayanja in Current Science Journal continue to upgrade Mbarara University of Science and Technology. So let us learn new things and let us improve. Attention capture for new ideas. I finished that. Assimilation. I had to assimilate a new way rather than remaining on a few things that are in public domain. Society uptake of new knowledge and findings still continues, especially now that we have several challenges of disease, several challenges of hunger, several challenges of technology. I can assure you, if academia, particularly those in engineering, nobody should earn money on your behalf, because you should have gone out and said, I'm in electrical engineering, I'm in mechanical engineering and civil engineering. Any building on the road, any commercial building on the road should have a point for charging now that we have gone electronic and electric. So for that matter, people are eating money on our behalf. And some of those who eat money on our behalf, they are not in our discipline that is serving the source of income they are utilizing. Ugandans, did you know that most of the, like Abbey Clinic in Wandegea, the owners are not doctors, the owners are lawyers. But because Wandegea sits between medical students from Makerere going to Galloway to study, some lawyers sat down and did a situational model for the students in 3rd year, 4th year, and 5th year to do clerkship, and for the doctors that are coming to Wandegea to have lunch and coming in the evening to take a drink, to sit in for a few hours and make consultation fee. The pharmacists sit in and dispense drugs. And this model has worked for them. And I can't tell you the other clinics they have come up with. In the medical world in Uganda, the biggest teams are not doctors. Let us wake up. Next slide, please. Knowledge diffusion in society creates a blueprint of mentors in society. How effective our researches and outputs to outlive our usefulness and our presence. Knowledge diffusion should be the critical point for us. And that's why some of these presidents, when they ascend into power, they want legacy and they involve everybody, particularly where they know resources come from, the Africans, the Asians. But I want to assure this meeting that some of us, our presidents, have been great, and they are coming up with a new system like the BRICS, like the new conventional bartering system. I understand for Kenya now, we buy petroleum products in local currency from Dubai. We barter with the products we have, agricultural produce, and this is the way to go. So let us use our disciplines and knowledge and the researches we have done and barter with those we find out are using our products. There is a reemergence of a new knowledge center as a result of research in least development countries to define new parameters of standards. And I think we are getting there, particularly in the recent dispensation of COVID vaccine, which did not follow the conventional protocols of the 15 years. The protocols, very rigorous. I would want to congratulate the engineering and civil engineers and material engineers and technical people in Kenya, because much of the built environment in Kenya has cotton soils. For that matter, they have come up with a solution. Instead of excavating and doing things, but they have now a remedy. So they teamed up. So let us make teams, let us tell our departments and university faculties, we form the best consultancies rather than going individually out there, and we form individual companies. And within these companies, we shall have our students we are mentoring and others coming up to do their practicum. And these students and the ones we mentor will have a profile longer than their age. And in the end, we shall succeed and be better than what we are today. And on this, finally, we need African scholar statues for generations to come. It is quite appealing when you are at London Square and you see Desmond Tutu and you see Nelson Mandela next to these important people. The last time I was in Sweden, as someone who has done a lot of research on plant materials, I wanted to see the grave of Linnaeus, the person who came up with plant nomenclature, how to give names, classification and nomenclature of plants. And I was privileged. My hosts, University of the KTH and the University of Uppsala, took me there. How many of us can be buried in central points, in central positions, because of what we've done, the engineering we've done, the food products we've come up with, the food recipes, the environmental research we've done. I want to assure you, we have a friend, Professor Julius Leju. He did credible research and predicted when Lake Victoria would dry up. But I would want to call him this weekend, and ask him, now that Victoria has flooded, what is your take on your conclusion that the quarrying and the foreign studies you did in Lake Victoria with Professor David Taylor of Trinity College Dublin, now that we have, but they have an answer, because Africa is separating. Let us not separate with our mentees. Next slide, please, as we conclude, about 2 slides to conclude, ladies and gentlemen. The next slide, I'm drawing water from an unknown well. The comfort of 2 strangers out of knowledge and skill. The previous presenters came up with, they alluded to students we are supervising and we had never met and we didn't know the departments append them to us. So we need a level, we need a time to understand one another as new supervisors and new mentees. And here I show you a photograph of one of the Cambridge students who came to do research in Bwindi and was amazed by the knowledge held within the ranger guides in what he was doing. And he came to us and said, you people, I think my professor should not fly here because I have my local professors. My thesis will be done in a short time. But then let's look on the photograph on my right. We have a stranger called a baby, very hungry. And we have a stranger called a cow with a lot of milk, which even this small baby cannot quench and exhaust. But then there are intrinsic hormonal, the humility I told you. If the cow has a lot of oxytocin, the milk letdown will reduce. So for that matter, let us work as these models. Let us not hide what we have. Let us share what we have. You never know. When this child grows in future, it could help the siblings and the children of the cow. When this gentleman came to this gentleman, we had trained in Bwindi as rangers, and we taught them a lot of science. Would take them through the rituals of science, however much they didn't know how to read and write. But with their indigenous coexistence with the ecosystem and the environment, they became more knowledgeable than us. And for that matter, sharing is one way of saying we are both responsible. Let us share. And let us not use our students we supervise as sources, as slaves. Let us instead be their slaves. It's when we have legacy. Mentorship chain. Mentorship chain. Technical team mentorship chain. The mentorship chain we are talking about, and we should use as our 10 commandments in the Bible, or the commandments in the Quran, or the commandments in the Pentecostal churches that have come, could be subject to mentorship. Do we understand it? And can we measure to the requirements? It could be discipline mentorship. It could be specific skill mentorship, ideological mentorship, practical skill mentorship. Do you know how to run practicals? Please go back. And publication mentorship. And you know, yesterday, Professor Josephine was telling us and taking us to the different levels of publications of our theses. If you wrote your thesis in manuscript, but the student you are supervising wants paper form, why refuse? Go back and learn. And it is under these gaps that ICAD management, with the able leadership of the head of programs, Dr. John Kinyuru, the director of training and extension, and other staff, came up with an idea that we need to look at the gaps in supervision. And here we are. We want your ideas. We want you to support us. And very soon, if funding allows, the first cohort should come here, and we write these things as a community. And we sell our ideas to universities, Inter-University Council of East Africa, to revise and have a common ground. New trends of mentorship in the digital era must be at inceptional level, but that's another mentorship chain. Of course, we the old are not as good and perfect. I went to Cambridge for my master's background courses, and I had never seen a computer, and I had never touched it. But Madame Smarts taught me, and I still reckon her expertise. But most mentors from time immemorial look at what they are to gain, which becomes a point of conflict and separation space. We all have to close if academia in this continent is to succeed. Let's not look at the gain first. Let's look at the production. Next slide, please. Next slide. Javan, ICAD teamed up with the EDI, Ethical Data Initiative. And let us be mindful on using people's images. If we can't defend ourselves, should they go to court? I'll put this slide to show you a 4-year era chain of mentorship. I mentored Professor Mauda Kamatenes in what I knew, and she shared with me in what she knew. Professor Mauda Kamatenes, former Vice Chancellor and former lecturer at Makerere University and immediate Vice Chancellor at Bishop Stewart University, mentored Dr. Savina Asimwe Byarugaba. And now they are coming up with several products within the plant oils, beneficial plant oils, and foods, by the way. And they have even won a presidential initiative and many other national funding and foreign funding. Dr. Savina Asimwe has mentored yet another person who has already finished the PhD from where she did her PhD, KTH in Stockholm. But for your information, we got free tickets, me and Mauda, to fly to the defense of Savina because they had a line of understanding on their students through SWOT analysis of their students, how they came up into that discipline. So you might be seated there and you get a call that, or some of these academia alerts asking you, were you part of this publication? Were you part of this research? And you say yes. When you say yes, you hit a jackpot. And as I conclude, I wish to say thank you on this Friday, the 9th day of our trainings, where we know conventionally the morals must go down, but I can still see the numbers are above average. I thank you and wait for your interjections, questions, submissions, subtractions, as we move forward to change the academic world. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you for that presentation. It's about 11:13 now, and we had projected to have this session end at about 11:30, which gives us maybe slightly over 15 minutes.
There's a hand, Patrick, from
yeah.
Dr. Kinyuru.
Dr. Kinyuru, okay, fine.
Thanks, Prof, for that good presentation.
Welcome.
And I think I like what you said towards the end, that for us to mentor, we must be readers ourselves. We really must read and keep abreast with the, technology, current information, and exactly what is happening. Yeah, this is in addition to also being part of the people who are actually developing new science and new knowledge, right? So I think that is very important. That yes, we must be generators of new knowledge, which we can use to enter others, but we must also be very keen to read what others are doing. And I think that's very important. Thank you very much.
Welcome. I saw 2 more hands. Technical team.
Was a hand from Juliet.
Okay. Juliet, are you still there?
Yes, Prof, I was just appreciating you for the great presentation. Was in the hand. Thank you very much for your very insightful presentation.
Welcome.
I didn't capture the other hand. It went down before I captured it.
By the way, now that we are looking at this topic called this monster called mentoring, I can tell this meeting that I'm not surprised. Within a short time, Juliet finished her master's, her PhD. She's now in the levels of supervising others, because during the undergraduate lectures, she would not go without asking a question. So probing and interrogation is equally important. Thank you, Juliet, for your early, and I'm glad the likes of Professor Leju identified you and supported. and Dr.
And thank
Professor Grace.
Thank you too for the support also.
Thank you.
Okay. So during Professor's presentation, Prof, you asked me to say something about the
the last
patenting
patent,
and IPR. Yeah.
Yes.
So I've looked through the records in the Training and Extension Division, and I haven't actually been able to find any records of ICAD carrying out this training externally. However, there has been some discussion.
It was in Nyeri, and the former R&D attended. Dr. Dom.
Okay. Because what happened was, you know that ICAD uses this performance contracting system, and during one of the sessions with the external evaluator, he asked, what progress ICAD had made on getting ISO certification.
Okay.
And we realized that within the institute, we were not very conversant on that topic. So we invited Kenya Bureau of Standards to come over and just do a seminar on this topic. And during that seminar, the issue of, how to handle innovations that may come up. We were funding researchers, or supporting researchers in our member universities to carry out research. And the feeling was that during the course of doing this research, they might come up with innovations that fall within the realm of, patenting and IPR. So I think that is where the possibilities of, conducting research, conducting training, for these researchers came up. And I think it was something that was supposed to happen between, the Training and Extension Division and R&D, coming together to do maybe a needs assessment to find out whether this would be something that universities would be interested in, and then maybe go ahead and plan for it. So it is something that we have talked about, and I think we will continue to explore the possibilities of doing something like that. I think for now, I think that's what I can say on that issue. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Maybe for those listening, ICAD is a team. There are no directives, but in the conventional university structure, when a dean speaks, the head of department gets cough. So, Mr. Director, Training and Extension, let's quickly come up with the modalities, the requirements of, let's say, 2 days, so that our first cohort of graduate training supervision, when invited during that time, then we invite experts on patenting, registration, and IPR. By the way, for your information, everybody listening in, the executive director at Aripo is from my village. I think we can leverage on that closeness. He was in Uganda, but he now sits in Harare. And we get the experience and others, and we get to know how one can do the trending in terms of a new innovation, of a new model, of a new method, so that we also earn money. It's important. And of course, since ICAD is a member of WITRO, we can also interest them to be part of us. And we have all the relationships that we can invite, and people get to understand. Why should the senior researcher not know how to write a patent, not know the procedures? And eventually, we will all be one, and we shall have what I told you, the negotiation skills. It beats my understanding when a professor or a senior academic goes into a World Bank meeting and the negotiation skills are below standard or don't measure up to those in World Bank. And you know, World Bank is an area that does not employ highly qualified people, but contracts through consultancy, highly qualified people to be managed by the unqualified. I thank you.
Okay. So I don't know if there's anybody else who has a comment or has an issue that they would like to raise. We still have a bit more of time, about 10 minutes. You can do it now. But while you are presenting,
Yes.
some comments are being posted on the chat. And I spotted two of them, one by Professor Tisekwa.
Yes.
And another one by Evans Nyakeri. I don't know whether you're able to access.
No,
and
I
read,
would see, but they would quickly go.
Yeah.
And,
Anyway,
I-
so Professor Tisekwa, if I may just read what he wrote.
Yes.
He said, Prof, all those taken together will work positively where there is an intersection of interest between mentee and mentor.
Yes.
A mentee should have a kind of catechist and priest relationship where the catechist always walks and keeps company with the priest. And then he says, in our days in the 80s, when we became tutorial assistants, we were assigned to a senior staff from whom we could learn, and that way the way they do things. In some universities, staff are recruited as assistant lecturers, who, when they join the universities, they come with their experiences, which they do not want to change. So maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, if I can first go on that, the structures in academia and universities have broken, and we need to get back to what it was. If I use an example of University of York in UK, members listening in, ladies and gentlemen, you go as a postdoc scholar, you'll first be introduced into a lab, and those instructing you in the lab are just lab technicians. So in other words, by the time you get to your promoter, who is at the same level as you are or higher, you have understood all the structure. Therefore, according to Professor Tisekwa's comment, he calls for a resolution and the reinventing what was there so that people get to understand, particularly in practical subjects. But when you recruit me from the conventional orders and guidelines that you must advertise, you must do this, that's where I was talking about talent identification. You are lecturing first years. Patrick and Dominic have never missed your lecture. You identify their talent on timekeeping and attendance. The next semester, you identify them on the grades. They're always above 8. On the next time, you identify them on doing practicals and having the interest to look for specimens. But today, I tell you, it is another story. Then the other comment?
Yeah, I've also been informed that there was a hand from Karen Kaberere.
Yeah, let's
So
listen
if she's
to
still
Karen.
there, yeah.
Thank you very much, Prof. Dominic, for that presentation. I was going to comment on what Prof. Tisekwa had said about the system that used to be that, yes, you identified talent, and that was mainly from the undergraduate, and then you'd recruit the best. That is no longer there. In fact, it is a very sad situation right now. I hear you repeatedly, not just you, the other presenters repeatedly talking about research funding. As I had said earlier, I come from the engineering background. Particularly in Kenya, there don't seem to be too much money being put into engineering. We are technology consumers. Most of the African countries, we are technology consumers. The industry, the whoever, there isn't much money coming into engineering. It is sometimes quite frustrating. I have seen students come in, first year, they know what they want to be. They are trying out things. Unfortunately, they go to our labs. There isn't much. There are no equipment. There's nothing. And you watch the student by the time they get to 5th year, they seem to have lost interest. You had identified them. In fact, when they come in, you tell them you can walk to any lab, you can go and try your hands on things. And that's where the point at which I see the frustration, even in those talented. They came in, they knew they wanted to get into engineering for 1, 2, 3 reasons. Instead of opening their mind, or I would call it enhancing what they were coming for, you find at the end of the day, these are the people who even change what they practice after graduation is not the engineering. So are we caught up somehow that where we want to be vis-a-vis where we are at as our countries, we are not there yet. We are still consumers and not really generating much in terms of knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I actually answer you in a very political way. There is a plan that those who know or those who have must go out, and we put our people. Because in the present world, if you are not on top, you shouldn't be giving knowledge. And what has happened, because there was that infiltration, there was some lax discipline, and there was some bit of person who slept on the job. If I entered without the requisite points or grades, and I rise in ladders, I must make sure I bring in those who are my level, so that we fight anybody who wants to unearth our deficient points. But this is the time to speak, because competition requires standards, requires proficiency, requires things of that level. And this is the time to do it. I want to inform you, Karen, as an engineer, the Kira vehicle in Uganda was being fought. But you recall, during the International Green Energy Exhibition at United Nations, under the auspices of UNEP, these buses and the car were driven here. This is in 2018, if not 17. And there was little conversation on green energy and going electric vehicles. But in 2020, just 2 or 3 years down the road, it was the discussion. Therefore, as academia, particularly in the disciplines of producing new knowledge and new products, we need now to go out on conversations on TV, and we speak out, because we are silent. And the moment we are silent, we shall bury these good countries, and the bad mark will be on me and you. I thank you.
Okay, Prof. There was also a comment that was posted by Evans Nyakeri, and he wanted you to comment on it. He says, in Kenya and maybe elsewhere, there is silent debate that maybe we do not need whole PhDs in management of the universities in the various senior cadres, VC, DVCs, or even registrars. They can serve best in areas of specialization and student mentorship, rather than, and these are his words, being wasted in management, where most serve as clerks to UMBS. Comment, please.
I think Prof had commented on it, Patrick.
Had you? Oh, okay.
No, I can conclude, my dear Director, Training and Extension. I have at times powered myself to you that I'm wasted. So some of us had laboratories, some of us, I remember having written a big proposal, and the money came later. So I think we need to sit down and be honest to ourselves and our institutions and universities and look at the management and ladder development levels so that we utilize. I only envy two professors, Professor John Mereseb-Wufu and Professor Livingstone Rubobi. These are the only vice chancellors who immediately they handed over office on a Friday. I was in Makerere. On Monday, they were in their departments. Professor Sebufu in the Department of Chemistry, Professor Rubobi in the Department of Mathematics as their non-biomathematician. The next week, they were on the chalkboard. Therefore, the ego and clout we get in management must cease to remain, but we must ask our governments to have a structure and a policy to cater for the landing of these people, because people are worried, how will I retire? That's why they do wrong things up there. We need a policy on emeritus professors. We need a policy on structures that will interest those who accidentally, as the comment came, I can use that word, rise into management positions, to see that back in their discipline and subject specifics, there are better things so that they work and they don't ask for a third term, fourth term, as it is in Uganda. I thank you, and back to you for housekeeping and management announcement.
Okay. I think this would be a good place to end today's session. I have looked at the other comments that have been posted on the chat, and most of them are just appreciative, thanking Prof for a good presentation and congratulating him for the manner in which it was delivered. And I would probably just, want to join, those that have commented in also thanking you. So
thank you.
Yeah, that brings us to the end of this session and also the sessions for the week. And we will link up again on Monday for the final session of this training course. So I wish you all a very good weekend, and I look forward to being with you again next week. Thank you.
Thank you too. You could also inform those who are still listening in that there will be two presentations.
Oh, yeah. So the first presentation will be made by Professor Byarugaba, but we have also invited S3 East Africa to say something about applications of GIS, in various fields of study. So that is basically what we have for you on the menu for Monday, before we close the training. Okay, have a good weekend, everybody, and see you on Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one too.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, thank you. Closing the session today. See you on